What's going on, everybody? Victor here with another brand new video. I'm going to continue to keep on covering UFC 300 and the fights that are on there because each and every single one of them are great fights, and that card is just absolutely stacked. UFC 300 taking place on April 13th, live from Las Vegas, Nevada. Pay-per-view, like I said, it's going to be pretty high price, but it's definitely going to be worth it for the caliber of fights that are on there. Now, one of the fights out there on that card that's very, very interesting, and that's on the early prelims, and that could be a main event fight on a lot of different cards out there. Just a regular fight night, or a fight night at the Apex, or a fight night at the city around US or anywhere around the world, is Jim Miller versus Bobby Green. We're talking about two fan favorites. Who doesn't love Jim Miller and Bobby Green? Because they just bring it each and every single time. Both these guys literally have 40 something, maybe even 50 something fights on their record. So these guys are absolute veterans. These guys know the game from the inside and from the outside. Both these individuals just come and bring it each and every single time. Jim Miller, I believe he has the record for he's got multiple UFC records, for crying out loud. I believe he's got the UFC record for like the most minutes, for the most fights, for the most wins. It's absolutely insane. And Bobby Green's just coming in here, just trying to do his absolute best and just trying to do his job at the end of the day, and not just win the fights, but also entertain the fans. He's an entertainer as much as he is a fighter. And Jim Miller is not going to really have any of that at the end of the day because he's just a straightforward individual, a straightforward fighter, and he just goes in there to try to put your lights out. He's been finishing people left and right lately, and Bobby Green's been finishing people left and right lately as of late as well. Even though he just got finished during his last fight against Jalen Turner, but both these individuals, even though they have a lot of longevity in their careers, they still have a lot in the tank, and that's what we all love to see as fans at the very end of the day. And when they go inside of the octagon, it's definitely going to be an interesting fight. I say it's definitely going to be on the feet because both these guys like to stand and bang. Both these individuals have power, for crying out loud. They have power to be able to knock you out. They have power to be able to knock you down. They also have both of them also have the ability to be able to submit one another, for crying out loud. So, and Bobby Green, I believe his first submission of his career was against Tony Ferguson on a pay-per-view. No one thought that Bobby was really going to be able to submit Tony Ferguson. A lot of people out there probably thought he was going to win the fight because of the decline of Tony Ferguson over the years, but no one thought he was actually going to get that submission win, even though he did. And then you have Jim Miller on the other side, who has many wins by knockout, many wins by decisions, many wins by submissions, and he's just two well-rounded fighters at the end of the day. The power is definitely going to be equal, if you have to ask me. The IQ between both of them, I'm saying it's also equal at the same time, but I'll give it a little bit of an edge to Jim Miller just because he's been around for so long. The power, in my opinion, is going to have to go to. Actually, I believe I said the power was actually equal between the both of them, and the IQ was. But the BJJ and the ground game is definitely going to have to go to Jim Miller because Jim Miller actually has a wrestling background, and Bobby Green also has a wrestling background as well. So you can see where a lot of the attributes between both these fighters really cancel each other out, which is what makes this fight so intriguing at the very end of the day. And if you were to ask who has more in the tank with this fight, I'm going to have to go with Bobby Green. And Bobby Green's a very interesting individual because he doesn't fight with his guard up like this. He fights down with his hands like this the whole entire time. So you never really know where any of those shots are going to be coming from when we talk about Bobby King Green. But when we talk about Jim Miller, he's got some very crisp striking himself as well. Obviously, he has knocked out people in the past. Bobby Green's last knockout was against Grant Dotson. A lot of people didn't really think that Bobby Green was going to win that fight, and that was a main event slot on the UFC, inside the UFC Apex, and Bobby Green ended up knocking him out in less than a minute, I believe. So Bobby has a lot of power, and he can be able to knock you out, especially when he has his hands down, because you don't know if he's going to throw a jab, you don't know if he's going to throw a cross, you don't know if he's going to throw an uppercut leading to a cross and a left hook, for crying out loud. You don't know where those punches are going. Another fighter that fights similarly to Bobby Green with his hands down is MVP Michael Venom Page, who made his debut at UFC 299 against Kevin Holland. He was fighting with his hands down the whole entire time, and Kevin Holland had a very hard time reading the strikes that he's going to throw. And I believe that Jim Miller's going to have a very hard time reading Bobby Green's strikes as well, because he's not going to know where the punches are going to be coming from. And when it comes to the creativity, I give it to Bobby Green, because when he does fight with his hands low, he's fighting with a sense of creativity. He's fighting with a sense of originality as well, because it's just his fighting style at the end of the day. He's worked with many coaches in the past, and he has not changed his fighting style at all. So the creativity and the use of the imagination to be able to put that imagination into a reality definitely has to go to Bobby Green. And at the end of the day, when you both these individuals together, you're obviously going to see that both these guys are going to strike. And if someone does have to take this to the ground, I say it's going to be Jim Miller, because, like I said, he likes to mix it up. And if it's going to go to the ground, I believe it's going to go. There's going to be a clinch first, and it's probably going to be against the fence, and that's when Jim Miller's probably going to change levels, get down, and try going for either a double leg or a single leg, and try to take Bobby Green down. But like I said, Bobby Green isn't the easiest guy to take down in the UFC, and he's fought in a lot of higher and stiffer competition. That's where Bobby Green basically gets in front of Jim Miller right now, because he's been facing stiffer competition as of late. Even though Jim Miller's been facing guys such as Charles Oliveira, Dustin Poirier throughout his career, so it's going to be a great fight between both these veterans. And if you have to ask me who's going to win this fight, I'm going to give it to Jim Miller, because Jim Miller, he still has a lot of the tank. He's still, when you look at him fight, it looks like he's getting a lot better. He's getting better and better and better, and he was dealing with Lyme disease for a couple years, and that really did decrease the ability of his fighting style, the abilities that he had to present inside of the octagon against some of his opponents as well. So that did contribute a lot to his decline, but ever since then, he's been on an ascent, and he continues on ascending and ascending and ascending with a lot of these performances that he's had. Even in the fights he's lost, he's been a dog. It's extremely hard for his opponents to be able to put him away, and he hasn't been finished in a very, very long time either. So I'm going to give this to Jim Miller, just because he's facing someone that's ranked within the top 15. Bobby Green's currently ranked 14 in the UFC lightweight division, so it's definitely going to light a fire in Jim Miller's soul, and he's going to want to go out there, put on a great performance, and get back into that top 15, especially after all the fights that he's been through, especially originally being in the rankings, having that streak of losses, and being kicked out of the top 15. It'll be a great way for him to get back in there in the top 15 after being put in UFC 300, after he's fought in UFC 100 and 200. Now it's going to be 300. The guy's a living legend. Bobby Green's a living legend. He came over from Strikeforce to the UFC, and he's been making an impact ever since, and he's been a fan favorite ever since as well. So I hate to see there being a loser in this fight, but I believe that Jim Miller is going to take this victory by decision. I don't believe anyone's getting knocked out in this fight. I believe it's going to be a lot of high-pace action. I believe it's going to be one of the opening bouts. I believe it's the second fight on the card, I believe. The second or third fight on the card, but it's a great way to basically open up the card a little bit. If it's the third fight on the card, then you're going to get a lot of eyeballs on that fight no matter what. And I'm going to assume that a lot of fans are going to get to Las Vegas, Nevada, to the T-Mobile Arena as early as possible to see a lot of these fights, because they're all really great fights at the end of the day. So I'm going to give this to Jim Miller. I believe that he's going to win. I believe it's going to be by a split decision, because it's going to be a closely contested fight. And then we'll just see what happens. It could be anyone's fight, but I'm going to give it to Jim Miller just because I believe he just wants it that much more, and he continues to get better with each and every single one of his performances. And Bobby Green is coming off of a brutal knockout loss, which was a really, really brutal one. The referee did an extremely bad job stopping that fight when he should have stopped it a lot earlier. So I'm going with Jim Miller on this. I appreciate you guys for watching this video. Stay tuned for the next ones that are coming up, and enjoy the UFC 300, guys. Later.